Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives. Not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial's set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 605-477-3249. In the front of the class, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Welcome, Rick.
Good morning.
Hey, Rick. You're affectionately known as Ricky Rocket. Where'd that come from?
That's your mom. Your mom was the one that did that. You know, when I came out to visit you, she came running out of the bedroom. Oh, Ricky Rocket's here. Ricky Rocket's here. That was when Mike Ma brought me in from the airport.
My mom is responsible for Ricky Rocket. Okay.
It's all her fault. I'm unfortunately now known as Rickety Rocket. Just an FYI. Not quite as stable as I used to be, and starting to feel the edges.
Yeah, pretty much everybody I know is saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah, in different words, but yeah, it's like everything is broken. Nothing is working correctly. PG&E last night turned off the power to more than 1 million people, and they said the power will be off for a minimum of 5 days. Now, why? Because of the high winds in California and the power lines that will drop and potentially cause wildfires. Now, last year, the wildfires in California were unbelievable, and Paradise was the least of it when the smart meters went unstable and the blue beams started leaping from one power meter to the next, where the 1,200 people that are still missing, unaccounted for, are most likely in ash because of the extreme heat from the microwave band fire setting. It is a typical PG&E claimed no contest. Grants Pass received a bunch of refugees. We heard stories, just horror stories, of where it would slag glass. There would be no bushes caught on fire, but the house was completely turned into cinder. And most likely, the missing people had no chance at all. They were gone in a moment. Paradise, California.
Rick, I read on the internet last night that, yep, you're absolutely right. I read about 2 million people are expected to be affected. That's a huge number, absolutely huge. And it affects when the power went out. Here's
the real problem. New Madrid fault line, where you guys are living, there are at least 21 Daiichi, like everybody says it's different. There's 22, there's 23. There's, that I know of, 21 Daiichi-like reactors, you know, on the New Madrid fault line. They're all leaking, and it takes 1 full year to turn one of those reactors off. They're all running, and if you have a grid down, that entire region of the United States is going to be uninhabitable for at least 10,000 years.
And what's east of it, right? Because the winds blow from the west to the east. And when we decided to move here, we thought, okay, where are these reactors? But pretty much everybody, or almost everybody in the United States, is east of reactors. And if they're not east of the reactors in the United States, they're east of the reactors in France and Europe and Japan.
I'll tell you one other thing that's bad. That map that the military uses, Chet Snow, that map came into being before the 70s. This is known since before the 70s. In the 60s, there are other maps. There's Scallion, there's Edgar Casey, there's all the different ones. This is the one the military keys off as the most likely worst case scenario, technically. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. But, I mean, in fact, science does not have any more answers than religion. That's why you have two brains. It's something else is going on. And the problem is, nobody is reporting it or talking about it in the media. And there is a list. There's a war going on right now. I had one of my handlers from Germany called. He's very high-end, fourth-level code. He is like as good as it gets in code. And he said that Apple and Google AI are at war with another AI. I don't know what it is, like maybe the dark web, something. But that what's happening is that all the hackers are now experimenting with beta testing on looking for cracks and making things fail in WooCommerce, PayPal, and the rest of it. And if you're on this list, you are automatically part of what's happening, to include stalkers, unsolicited phone calls, and harassment that may or not even be human.
Last night I got a call from the police, and this was this guy. The phone rang, and it rang, and it rang, and I thought, I might recognize this number, but I'm not sure. If I don't recognize it, normally I just don't answer it. But I decided to answer it. And there was silence for about 3 or 4 seconds. Then this guy gets on and says, "Hi, I'm John, and I'm with the police, some organization collecting money for the police." Now, that is one of those calls that is against the law to make. It's non-requested solicitations. We're on the do not call list. And the police, or their organization benefiting the police, is making calls that are illegal. That's the kind of stuff that's going on. You're right, there's nobody to call. You can't complain and have anything done because the incompetence level goes all the way up to the top. And this thing about California is, to me, is very, very serious, because I don't think anybody ever thought, like in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, I don't think anybody thought that a utility company would shut off the electricity. Now, we thought that, storms would come in and there'd be anomalies, power lines might get taken down, transformers might get overheated.
Have you noticed it has not made the front pages of any page? Well, if it does, it's down in the lower left-hand corner in a little section way down there where the front end is showing some guy with his locker beef watching it age or something. I have to say that everybody is completely, including myself, unprepared. And many people, friends of mine, are now no longer caring. They're not taking their meds. They're not doing their exercises. They're just letting themselves go because. And when you watch TV, that's what I'd like to talk about today, what they're doing with what we call dopamine hacking. And it is brand new. It is a new concept, and yet it was what I developed back in the 70s when I was working military. I wrote 3 papers on that called The Diamond Body, Electromagic, and yogatronics. And basically, I was trying an attempt to communicate directly to neurotransmitters using pulses of electric current on a thing that I called the wire, something that you put on the top of your head and dialed in what personality you wanted to have for that day. And Norman Spinrad, a friend of mine, wrote a science fiction story around that called Little Hackers. And let me tell you, Little Heroes, Little Heroes. And it is about the wire where you could put this wire on and decide, today I'm going to be a female, and dial it in. Now, that was what I was doing in the late 70s with the military, using video feedback systems, not biofeedback. I had already done that and used that when I was training Navy SEALs. I was moving to the next level after the SEAL Corporation program was over in terms of using video, using light, sound, and color imaging to change persons. And at one point, I did a study using an emu. I had, like a bukla, I had an emu. It was a synthesizer. And I was able to put color patterns up on the stage where I had 100 people sitting in an audience. And within 10 seconds, with 8, 7, 6, 5, I could make 90%, 90 people out of 100 all stand having to go to the bathroom. I had that level of control on some of their biological functions using light and sound. And I'll be writing those books if I'm allowed to do that later when I finish other books. I have a whole bunch of books coming out right now. And my website is currently going through some very unusual phenomena. And so everybody listening, if you want to help me, there is a $3 book called Healing Yourself that is $3. It's a download. And what I would like to have done is have everyone listening to this go in and spend $3. I'm not going to make any money on this, but tell me in an email what your experience was in getting this order or not, and what happened when you tried to use your credit card, what happened when you got the successful sale and then tried to do the download. I need that information now, and I need it individually because people are going to my site, they're having trouble, and they don't bother to call me. They think, oh, I'll just go back later. I need all of you to go in and tell me what you feel and sense and see and your personal experience on it. It is essential because somebody or something is changing things arbitrarily. And while this may be the beta testing, I've been told that PayPal has been compromised, that it is no longer a safe system for transfer of money. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can tell you that handshakes are so complicated now in going from WooCommerce to PayPal that there are a dozen different little cracks in that system that if you do this, then that happens. It's crazy. And what happened next is when people bought these books, then they couldn't download them because they were corrupted. How does that work? Well, we go in and we fix the corruption, and the corruption goes back to same again. And that's what
Hold that thought. We're going into a break. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, and I just learned something today about Rick that I didn't know, and that was about this Diamond Body trilogy. And Rick, in your writing, you say that based on the synergistic work of Buckminster Fuller, this work, the Diamond Body, unifies models from solid-state physics, Jungian psychology, and cross-cultural systems of meditation. And
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'll tell you what, and you said in the late 70s, is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I am ahead of everybody. Right now I'm talking about how neurotransmitters in the brain are resonant cavity oscillators talking to subtle bodies outside the physical body, allowing placebo and the mind's eye to go from 10% in allotropic medicines to 60% by just healing yourself in your mind's eye using neurotransmitters. I am Yes, that's why the military used me. And unfortunately, I'm now 76 years old, and I'm a tired old man that has been beaten down. I need help. I don't know what I need. It's terrible. It's terrible what they're doing to me. It's not right.
Rick, when you talk about the diamond body, do you know about when that was in the 70s? Was it how late in the 70s was that?
I was known. I did. Okay, Buckminster Fuller hired me to understand and translate Bob Marshall. He was an idiot savant on heroin out of California that nobody could understand. He was an idiot savant, genius. And I have a book coming out on him called The Marshall Papers that was edited by 20 mathematical experts trying to interpret Bob Marshall. And what I did was the vector equilibrium matrix. It's basically what you would call a triangle. It is a relationship of one point to another point in a new concept that formed later the buckyball. Now, basically, the vector equilibrium matrix is a mathematical anomaly that cannot exist, and yet there it is. And what I have right now is while I'm talking to you, is 5 turkey, the mother, and 6 turkeys. The mother and 5 turkeys up on my rail, second floor up, eating bread that I put out. It's very cool. Basically, Aleister Crowley, in the second of 3 books in the Book of the Law, said, quote, add, divide, multiply, and understand, and one will follow. And that historically became known as the follower. And basically, everybody thought that was Frater Akkad, Stanfield Jones, my teacher. He wrote a book called The Anatomy of the Body of God, where he took the tree of life and expanded it into all directions in 3 dimensions, in 2 dimensions. And that was the anatomy of the body of God. What I did was expand it into n dimensions using my holographic concept of reality called n equals 50, v equals 6. That's the paper. And that is why lodges throughout Europe have been using my system of pathworking for more than 20 years, because in the secret societies, I'm known as the follower. Now, this is, who knows what that is, and I chose not to be caliphate or grade 10 in OTO. And what happened next is I was given publication in Class B. The only other person in history, besides Aleister Crowley, that is considered, I'm a physicist that did not blow myself up. The one that did was Jack Parsons, and he started Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And what I'm trying to do now is survive. And it's all I can do at age 76. It's terrible what they're doing to me. And when I say that, you have no idea. You have a sucker, mine's in federal prison. What happened for me is for more than 1.5 years, this guy would call 3 times a day, maybe at 2 or 3 in the morning, threatening me. And I wouldn't answer, and for over 1.5 years, I gave him no feedback.
Hold that thought. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, you were talking about getting calls 3 times a day, and then you went into a commercial break.
Like he would call at 2 in the morning or 4 in the morning. He would do things like leave messages on my phone like this. Ha ha ha. 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 And it went on and on. It was absurd. It was funny. But when he started threatening my family, I got angry. And I picked up the phone and I called a friend of mine in L.A. He was a detective. And he flew up to Abbotsford, talked to the Royal Mounted Police, and they monitored him, found he was in violation of federal laws, and stuck his ass in jail. He was actually written up in Huffington Post. Now, the bad news is his older brother has an AI algorithm writing program in Olympia, Washington, and writes for Abbotsford, which is where the third generation D-Waves are out. He's number one on my list. I have a long list of other things. And just as an FYI, one of my best and oldest friends, Mad Abe Abarello, in 1970 became my good friend. It was hit team number one from the Brazilian Secret Service, and then headed the Brazilian Secret Service for 42 years, has just retired, and he's my friend and someone I can pick up the phone on. And if I ever find out who did this to me, there will be blood, and I'm saying it publicly. I've had enough. I'm 76 years old. I don't care about myself anymore. I'm going to find out who did this, and I'm going to hurt them.
Rick, I see in my travels, I'm seeing more and more of what you're saying. I'm seeing so much me first. I'm seeing so much carelessness, recklessness, total disregard for what used to be civility.
By the way, this guy was probably not a stalker. He was probably paid, because who would continue to harass somebody with no feedback of whether or not it's being effective or not for over a year? And by the way, I have some guys in the Philippines that try to hack my computer and are saying for $480 I can resubscribe and they'll stop harassing and controlling my computer. And I haven't responded. I don't even answer their phone anymore. I have their number. I can't block it. Why can't I block it? Isn't that interesting? So I don't answer it. And they've been harassing me for 4 years without any response on my side. If you were running a boiler room with a bunch of phones, at some point you'd move on. I have hackers that said I've visited a porno site, that they have me masturbating, and they're going to put it up on a screen if I don't do so many things in Bitcoin. And of course, I've never been to a porno site that they're talking about, so I don't know what they're talking about. And all of my cameras are plugged with tape when I'm not using them. So it's gimmicks, but the federal protections of FBI, nobody's protecting people like me. I go to the local police to file a police report on them, and the FBI in Medford didn't even want to hear it. The one in Portland, the FBI in Portland took my report. The one in Washington, D.C. was more serious and took my report also. But, nothing is happening. I still get those calls every day.
Look, I think we're going to get...
I just, live through it. I have to go forward. I can't stay backward. But at some point, I'm going to drop a nickel, and that's baba bing, baba bang, baba boom.
I think that many people have experienced these threatening emails, and the same email, same kind of emails. We've got you on, we've got your screen, we've got your traffic, so forth, and so I've called the web hosting service. They say, oh yeah, it's just a scam, and so people are actually doing this, and I'm looking forward to the day when we go into the Walking Dead scenario, and then there are no rules, and then these people become the objects of drawing and quartering. I'm talking about literally slicing them open slowly. Maximum pain. That's what they deserve. Because there's no reason for any of this.
You know, that's the movie Blacklist. I love that. I love that show. I'm watching it again now. It came out a long time ago. It's called Blacklist on Netflix. And it is exceptional with David Spader. It's exceptional. And he's an absolute worst of kind criminal and working directly with the FBI to stop really weird people. And the problem is the writers have nailed it, just like they did with Designated Survivor. It is exactly what's going on out there. There are some very ill people. And, the hackers are the ones that are sick, because how could they even comprehend or come up with such a thing unless they're doing it? Because I never even could think of anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen the series The Walking Dead?
No, I haven't bothered with Zombie Land yet. Zombie Land was my most favorite movie, by the way. The double tap rule.
Yeah. Well, Rick, when you get some time, please consider watching The Walking Dead. And let me just give you a thumbnail sketch of this. So there is this disease, if you will, that happens to everybody. Everybody's infected. Everybody. And when a person dies, he dies or she dies, but some of the brain is still alive. And that's the part of the brain that seeks out nutrition. But nutrition has got to be blood-borne nutrition. So rats, mice, people. People are the best bang for the buck because there's plenty of blood and gore and guts to eat. But what happens is, as a person dies, and whether it be a car crash, whether it be murder, they become the walking dead. So people die every day all over the world. And so these barely alive carnivores are looking for the next person to eat. So that's omnipresent. At the same time, everything stops. The grid is down. Gas stations are not, they're not manned. There's nobody there. There's no delivery. There's no internet. There's no food production. There's no clothing production.
There's Hostess Twinkies.
Yeah, if you can find them. And so what happens is those who have survived, and there are not very many, and they don't know why these people have survived, but some have survived. But when they die, they become the walking dead too. So if they're bitten, this disease is transferred. The person dies of a fever, then they come back to life very quickly, and they want to eat everybody that's around them, including their former friends. Well, so you have this always present threat of the walking dead, but then you have scarce resources. And then you see what people do to each other that are still alive. Like they will kill each other. Some will kill each other for fun. Some will kill each other because they have some small item, a can of food, guns. Guns are really at a premium, but the ammo's running out, food's running out, and you have to travel in an ever farther circles to find things to survive. And then you meet people, and you don't know if you can trust them. They double cross, triple cross, quadruple cross. It's amazing. And so there are bonds of people that work together, but it's really hard to find people who will work together. Mostly people are interested in not trusting anybody. And that's where we're headed. I can see it every...
Yeah, I know that's... I am seeing that everything is now being broken and tested, beta testing, to see if they can do this, if they can do that. Just while I was off the air, something, PayPal went into my account, took $56 out of my credit card account, and posted it on Facebook that I now have $56. They're taking money out of my site at will, testing to see if they can do that. I'm getting it back today. Tomorrow I probably won't.
Rick, what I've done is I've shut down our website. We have been attacked.
How do I sell my books? How do I do that? Amazon is reproducing. Ingram is reproducing. I have no way to promote my books, I am stuck.
Mm-hmm. And I am too. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, you want to give me a hard time? I'll shut down the website. I don't care. So yeah, I've lost potential revenue. I've lost the medium for selling my book if I ever decide to publish it, and I don't even know if I want to publish it. I'm at the point where, last night I seriously thought, do I want to continue this or not? And I'm not so sure I do. It does nothing for me. Being on the radio provides nothing for me other than the friendships that we've already developed.
This is important, Vincent. Listen carefully. There's a little plaque in my bathroom that I stare at every morning when I do my morning. It says, there is nothing more than unrewarded genius, and it is persistence that wins the day. Mm-hmm. Unrewarded genius is an axiom, but if you have a good idea and you stay with it, that's what makes it happen. I am not, by my very nature, ever going to give up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm saying is,
I won't do it.
I'm certainly not going to give up farming. That's what we do. That's what pays the bills.
I meant I'm going to go out and point fingers on what I see is happening.
Huh? Well, they don't like it.
Well,
this plague. That's
the problem. You will probably never really know, but historically, you may be remembered as being one that would not give in.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really interesting. When I go on Republic Broadcasting Network, which is a competitor of Genesis Communications Network, we're on both networks. We're the only radio broadcast that's on two networks. And we get calls thanking us for what we do, like all the time.
Yes.
And we get calls
People
on GCN
what we're
thanking us for volunteering to share information. But yet there are these wicked, and I think wicked is the term, they're everywhere. There are wicked people everywhere. They're behind the wheels of vehicles. They're in stores. They leave trash everywhere. They throw it out the windows. It's awful. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. Rick, we started the broadcast talking about Pacific Gas and Electric, and we talked about how no one ever thought that the power company would shut off the power intentionally. We knew that there would be anomalies. We knew there'd be weather conditions, storms, so forth, that would cause outages. We knew that. But we never thought that the electric company would just turn off the power. And this is a really serious change. It's like, as you say, everything is falling apart. Nothing's working right. It's just one more example, but this is affecting about 2 million people. And I just wanted to share with the class just a couple things of what this might mean. So if you have a store and you have refrigeration to prevent spoilage, and the power is going to be off for days, weeks, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with those items that you paid for that will be a total loss unless you sell them very quickly? And who are you going to sell them to? Because they don't have refrigeration either. And then the traffic lights aren't working and the computers aren't working because uninterruptible power works fine for a very short time. And I'm talking about minutes. It doesn't work fine for days. The telephone companies have generators to keep the landlines up and running and keep the network up and running, the internet, but they don't have an infinite amount of power. So the gas pumps, the gas stations, the fuel terminals, they're not going to be working. So it's going to be difficult to get fuel to the gas stations, which don't have power to begin with. If you have an electric car, that's great. You're all set. You can't charge your electric car. And then just people who have wells, how are they going to get their water unless they have a generator? And then how about just something as simple as an electric fence charger? So there are farmers who have electric fence chargers, and they use a pulsed high voltage, so 3,000-4,000 volts, low current to not hurt the cows, but just to remind them, don't touch the fence. Those cows are going to learn very quickly because they can smell the ozone coming off the fence wire as the electric pulses charge the fence. So when those electric fences stop working, the cows are going to, in a couple of days, they walk right through the fence. They're going to leave. And now what are you going to do? Have you ever tried to herd cows that have gotten out? It is absolutely no fun, and it's very difficult. So, I mean, those are just a couple of things. Then we have, of course, the hospitals and the doctor's offices. What doctor's offices have generators? Very few. What television stations and radio stations have generators to power the transmitters? Those transmitters are 50,000 watts in many cases. 50,000. That's an enormous generator. So I think this is a really serious situation, Rick. And I have a feeling that, well, why are they doing this? Because they've been forced into bankruptcy, Pacific Gas and Electric, because of the wildfires that like the camp wildfires in California. So those customers have begun to sue for damages Pacific Gas and Electric, and they're looking at about $30 billion in litigation. $30 billion. They can't come up with that kind of money to pay back. So they went bankrupt to protect themselves. So now they're shutting off the electricity. And I really think that this is the template for other utilities to say, you know what? I think it's going to be bad. I think it's going to be hot and windy. Let's shut off the electricity. This is also a great test to see what people do. And I think we're going to see something a little bit similar to The Walking Dead in California if this continues for a while. People are going to start stealing whatever they need in their mind to survive. I think there's going to be violence. I think there's going to be theft, burglaries, arson. What do you think? Do you think that's within the realm of possibility?
What East L.A., when they're out of food, that is a zombie. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because in the 80s, the Soviet Union, before it broke down into Russia, had a zombie virus. It is well known and has been described. That's what The Walking Dead was based on, was this, that the Ukraine had developed. And it's a zombie-like virus that attacks certain parts of the brain.
So we're talking about supermarkets.
A little
shutting down.
Did you see the Kailua during Fukushima? The stores were gutted in the fear of something impending like a tidal wave hitting the Big Island. In Kailua, the stores were gutted during Fukushima. They absolutely got gutted. It's a natural, unfortunate, instinctual reaction. And the first thing that's going to happen will be drugs and weapons. And people that are stockpiling either are going to be the first ones hit.
Pretty scary. Pretty awful. And man is absolutely the most destructive life on the planet. We are just destroying the planet for personal greed. It's awful. Rick and I will be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. His website, richardallenmiller.com. richardalanmiller.com. Rick, yesterday I spent several hours with a young author. He's degreed, and he comes from one of the finest universities in the world. And he's writing a book about preparedness. And so he had been contacting me for many times. And I've been teaching him about preparedness. And so we decided to meet for the first time yesterday. And I've been putting it off because a lot of things have happened here at the farm. But I had a meeting with him yesterday, and we met face-to-face for the first time. And I was sitting across from him at this great big store, and I decided to meet him in a store. And they had a food court kind of area. And I wanted to tell him, look at this gal over here, this obese, overweight gal. in flip-flops. And it really, I didn't want to say, look at this. Would you look at that over there? Look at that. I didn't want to do it because we just met. So I didn't. And then I noticed that, she got whatever sugary beverage she was going to get. And she walked over to a table near us where she joined her mother. And her mother was wearing slippers. Now, when I talk about slippers, I'm talking about, these are the ones that have the strap that goes over between your toes and your leg. That maybe a 3-inch band. You kind of push your foot through them. It's a flip-flop almost without the toe part. Like, you would wear these at home. You'd shuffle along. I mean, I wouldn't, but some people do. And I thought, here they are. They're outside. They're walking from the parking lot into the store.
The Walking Dead.
They are the Walking... Right. They're the Walking Dead. And the reason I'm mentioning that is we're surrounded by this. And I took this young man on a tour of the store where you could buy all kinds of things. It was one of these great big warehouse-type places. And I said, let's go on a tour, and why don't you show me in this store what you would consider preparedness items that now that you've learned about preparedness, what you would consider buying, money being no object. And why would you choose what you chose? And it was very interesting. And I stopped in the middle of this great big area where lots of people were checking out at the registers. And I said, half these people are fat. And it's true. And I'm looking at an article right now, Daily Mail. Global obesity epidemic laid bare. The average life expectancy of Americans is almost 4 years shorter than it was. 4 years. We are falling down, and you can see it. You can see it in any store you want to go to, whether there's a membership, whether it's the lowest common denominator like the Chinese factory outlet. It's everywhere, and people are getting sicker. Type 2 diabetes is rampant, and it's because, I believe, people are not paying attention. They've given up. They don't care. They don't care. They want their bread. They want their Twinkies. They want their Little Debbies. They want McDonald's, Burger King, Arby's.
The real problem is that there's mind control on TVs, screens, texting. It is a dopamine hacking is the correct terminology. And they get caught up in this excitement of texting. And 1 in 4 people in Oregon are obese. I personally, in this last 8 months, have lost 48 pounds. I'm not down to weight yet. I'm within 10 pounds of where I was when I was in high school. Now, I'm looking good. However, I'm an old man, which means I've got more fat than muscle. In other words, I don't have the heavy. I have the light. And where I'm going now is a woman called me last night saying, I was at your site. And it turned out she was at my Northwest Botanical site that is over 10 years old. I haven't used that site in 10 years. And she said, I'm looking at Synephrine as a way to lose weight, bitter orange. And I said, there's only one way that you can lose weight, and that's by changing your eating habits. And the only way you do that is it takes at least 3 months of counting calories, 1,200 calories a day, so that you are rigorously having to be involved on lunch, breakfast, and dinner. And the second rule is that's the only way anyone will lose weight is by eating 1,200 calories a day. If the second rule is everything you eat must be 10% or less fat. That means these power bars that are for weight loss are running 12 to 15%. They're not good. They don't work. The way you do it is how many grams of fat to total calories. And grams of fat is times 7. divided by total calories, and it's either 10% or less, or it's toxic. And it takes 3 months to change a habit in what you eat and why you like it. Sugar becomes candida. You can smell it. You can feel it as moisture between your crack and your butt. You can feel it under your armpits. You can smell it as body odor. That's candida. And there's only one way to get rid of candida, and that's apple cider vinegar, outside and inside, where you are drinking 1 tablespoon 3 times a day. That will get rid of candida. It's sugar. The problem is you get caught up in a habit, and you don't recognize it, and it's now you think you need it. And texting is how they're doing it, and that was why I opened this talk with video feedback systems, because I developed that technology 50 years ago. And I can tell you, I'm watching it happen now. I am a very unusual person in terms of my length, girth, and width of knowledge base, like you, very special. And I can tell you that they're now using, it's called dopamine hacking. There are software programs that kids get addicted to these gaming, and they can't stop. It's like cocaine, freebasing. It is addictive. They have to do more and more. And that is how you define a zombie.
But you don't have to do it, Rick. And I'll tell you why. I don't have a cell phone. I used to have a cell phone.
I don't have one either.
Well,
and I don't like texting.
Okay, here's what I did. So I dumped the cell phone. I dumped Facebook. I dumped checking the internet many times a day. I dumped checking emails. And I dumped answering the phone. So let me give you just one example. So our house is not finished. It's 15 years in the making, and I've decided that it'd really be nice to move into a bedroom rather than sleep in a sitting room. So we have a bedroom, and it's a really nice bedroom, but the walls aren't finished. So I decided to finish them, spackle, plug the holes where the insulation was blown into the walls. There's like hundreds of holes in this room. I mean, literally hundreds. And I plugged them up with 3-inch plugs, made the boards for it, and spackled them all. It's taken months just to finish the spackling in this one room. So what I did was I didn't bring the landline telephone up on top of the second height or second level of spackling so I could climb off the ladder, get to the second level, and then answer the phone. I'm not answering the phone. So I'm up there spackling. I spackle until I can't do it anymore. Then I take a break and I climb back up. And what I'm saying is I have distanced myself from the phone. And if the phone rings, I go, the phone's ringing. And I keep spackling. That's what I'm doing. And I'm getting more done.
Change that habit of response where you feel a need.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I don't feel a need to answer the phone. And I'm saying this publicly. Instructors are listening. I'm telling everybody that I will not be on tap 24/7. I can't. And I won't anymore. And I won't
and
put
they
the
text
phone.
you. You know, I have email. I've had email for years. But now Facebook has Messenger. And so somebody wants to talk to me on Facebook, it sends me an email. That email, then I have to go to Facebook. That's 2 correspondences for one person. And then when you add Alignable, LinkedIn, Academia, and all these other social networks, I'm overwhelmed. And it's all about texting. I won't text. I type on a large pad. I don't thumb it. And I will not, I'm telling people now, just an old-fashioned call is the best way to get a hold of me. And if you don't like that, come visit me. Darshan, eyeball to eyeball. That has meaning. And the rest of it is very superficial.
Rick, when when I had a job back in the 80s, I worked at a bank, and they implemented an IBM intranet. So, for example,
I remember that.
It's called TOS, Total Office Support System.
Was FTP, File Transfer Protocols, and Gopher?
Yeah, and Data General made one, and they had their inter-office communication system. So instead of typing up a memo saying, hey, we're having a meeting Tuesday at 2 o'clock, it's about this, you're invited, please attend, somebody would just do the equivalent of send an email. So it was, IBM had it, all the major computer manufacturers of the day in the 80s had this. So it was the forerunner of email. And people would say to me, hey, where were you? What do you mean? You weren't at the meeting. Yeah? What meeting? Well, we invited you and you didn't go. Oh. Did you call me? No. Did you put a note in my in-basket? No. Did you put a note on my desk? No. So why did you expect me to be there? Well, we sent you a TOS. You don't read your TOS. Of course I don't read my TOS. Because the reason I didn't read my TOS was if it was important, they would have contacted me. They would have told me what it's about. And what happened is companies became more blame-finding. What I mean by that is corporations would say, I don't know who should be at this meeting, but I better invite everybody because if I leave somebody out, their feelings will be hurt. And so, and to prevent that, everybody got invited to everything. And if you went to all these things, you'd never get your job done. And I wouldn't do that because I realized that I had a job to do. And that's why I was there. I wasn't there to attend all these meetings that didn't make sense for me to be there. So I would say, if you want me to come to a meeting, if you think it's that important, you'll contact me on the phone, or you'll come see me, or you'll leave me a note. Otherwise, I'm not going. Let's talk about some obvious results you can easily see of what's happening. There's a video that was suggested by Joanne. She's one of our class here on the broadcast classroom. And she suggested watching a video called American Factory. It's a documentary. There was a General Motors plant that was shut down in Ohio, and the factory workers were making $29 an hour or so, and they were laid off, and as a result, they couldn't find any work. And many of them lost their houses, their cars. Some lived in basements of, friends and relatives' houses. It was terrible for them. Their life was turned inside out, upside down. It was literally terrible. And so they were paid about $29 per hour, many of them. Union jobs, United Auto Workers jobs, $29 an hour. The union protected them, and then ultimately GM closed the factory. So they were without a job, and a Chinese company that made glass came to that GM building that was left by GM when they moved out, and they started setting up this factory to make glass, and they paid the workers about $12 an hour, non-union workers. And it was very interesting because the Chinese who built the machinery and who brought the machinery over and populated the factory floor with machinery was trying to teach the Americans how it works, how to become an employee in the Chinese culture. And the Chinese were used to 12-hour days. Americans are used to 8 maybe. And if you look at this video, you'll see that the Chinese are lean, they're strong, they're efficient, they don't waste motion, and the Americans are, breaking things, costing the company a fortune, and the chairman of the company is really having a tough time he's having a tough time managing the Americans because they're like loose cannons. They call a meeting with the Chinese, and in the Chinese factory that makes the same glass in China, they have a before shift prep meeting, and they all stand in line. There's 2 lines, and they count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 18. Okay, there's 18 of you. Great, we're ready to go to work. Have a wonderful day. And off they go to their stations. The Americans, they have trouble getting them to line up. It's like a bunch of misfits. It's like, the black sheep, the Corsair Squadron in World War II didn't take direction very well at all. They couldn't be team players. Now, I've talked about us being, all of us not taking direction well, but that doesn't mean, when I say that, I mean that if we have a better idea, we're going to say it. Okay? Well, these Americans are fat, lazy, and they shipped them over to China. They sent them over to China to see how the same factory works in China. And these Americans get there, and they stand out like a sore thumb. And the reason they stand out is the Chinese are all dressed nicely. The Americans are wearing T-shirts, and they look sloppy, and they're fat, and they're tattooed. And you look at the Chinese, they're prim, they're proper, they're glad to have the job, they give it their all. And the Americans, they're just there for the money. It's a completely different culture. And I think that if we keep this up, this sloppy, lazy, careless, reckless behavior of Americans, we're going to lose. We're going to lose to China because they're organized, they're disciplined, and they're all playing for the same team. Our guys are mercenaries. If you stop paying them, they won't show up. And then the Americans are fed up and they want to unionize. But not all of them want to unionize. Some of them say, are you kidding me? There's no alternative. There's no other job. And then you guys want to unionize and make it more difficult to communicate with management. And if we do that, the Chinese will probably pull out and we'll have nothing. So we'll have won and formed a union or joined a union and killed the company. I mean, that's what Americans, they're not thinking. They're really not thinking. Now, I do understand that top management makes a fortune on the backs of little people, but there can be a balance. There really can. But in this, you got to see this video. It's called American Factory. And it just shows how sloppy we are. We really are. And to me, it's an outrage because we used to be the best. And I'm wondering, if we have to fight another country, can we really do it? If you take our technology out and we actually have to run with a battle pack and a battle rifle, are we fit enough to actually carry what World War II soldiers carried on their backs? I don't think so. Dr. Richard Alan Miller's with us, richardallenmiller.com, Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. Rick, do you have any comments about what I mentioned about the Chinese trying to operate a factory in the United States, and top management from China is throwing up their hands like, I can't manage these Americans. There's two cultures. It's difficult to get.
That's like Japan. And remember when Detroit started seeing Nissan coming into the America with their work ethics and habits and the way they exercised in between their breaks, it's all cultural. When the United States has gotten sloppy.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sloppy, I have a question. This could be the kiss of death for a radio broadcast, but let's do it anyway, if you want. You don't have to answer. If you don't want to answer, just say, I'm not going to answer. But I was looking at TalkStream Live, and TalkStream Live is a radio aggregator, and they show who's in what position in rank, who is number 1, 2, 3, 4, up to roughly 100 at any point in time. So this is live information ranking, but there are no numbers saying how many listeners. They know how many listeners, but this is measured on the internet. And so I see, and I don't want to mention any names, so we won't mention any names, but there are radio broadcasts that have the name of the message. So, for example, it might be, and I'm just making this up, the Science Show, okay? And then there are other names of broadcasts like, and I'm making this up also, the Joe Dokes Show. The person, the broadcaster's name is the name of the show. The Joe Dokes Show, the Mary Smith Show, I'm making that up too. And then the Science Show, the Economic Show, I'm making that up too. So you've been on a lot of radio shows, Rick, and I haven't. I've been on some, but the question I have for you is, have you noticed a difference in the type of broadcasting that is done with a person's name being the name of the show versus the subject matter being the name of the show? Is there a difference or not?
Yes and no. I have individuals that I have opinions about. And I'm going to be very good by not mentioning anybody, but there are people that I much, much prefer being with and being interviewed by than others. And everybody that does that has agendas. And so they try to steer or manipulate me toward their agenda. There are very few that actually want to hear what I think. I'm one of the very few people that's my email, that EU, telling me I just got another undeliverable. You know, I'm watching how everything is broken, and nobody picks up my distress signal trying to say, you have no idea what's going on here. It's terrible. And it is. And I will understand what you must be going through because I've been also experiencing it. And there's no words to describe it. And I don't think anybody really understands the severity of the problem right now. But California will. 1 million people are off the grid right this moment for a good 6 or 7 days. And as the temperature is starting to swing, watch what happens next.
Rick, we're talking about schools closing. We're talking about primary, secondary, college-level schools closing because of no electricity. We're talking about pumps not circulating. We're talking about sewage treatment plants. We're talking about water pumps that pump water up into the water towers for the municipal water systems. We're talking about traffic lights. We're talking about, boy, I wish I had an electric car right now. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the guy who's got an electric car and he says, okay, look, it's really terrible. Let's get out of town. Oh, battery's dead.
It's going to be a real interesting Hollywood script.
So, Rick, back to that question. Is there a difference, and without naming any names, is there a difference between naming the broadcast, you know, the science show, the economic show?
Yeah, when they put their name on it, it's about them. It's not about what they're trying to do.
That's my question. And is there an ego difference? Have you discerned
that's what we're talking about. An ego is a survival coefficient. It is a tool for survival. So it's important. It what distinguishes you from me, ego. And, you know, wounding. And wounds are not bad things. They're what make us unique and uniquely individual, and can be, if you go into biblical references, are blessings from the Lord.
And I was thinking about, and it's not just radio. It's, you know, it might be community, I'm making this up too. It might be Community Chevrolet or Tri-County Chevrolet or Joe Dokes Chevrolet or Mary Smith Chevrolet. And I'll bet it's the same thread that runs through that, naming the company after the person versus naming the company after the area. Like precision, and then fill in the blank. And I'm making this up. BMW, Mercedes, precision tuning.
Sometimes that has to do with where you're positioned in the phone book.
Mm-hmm.
AAA tools.
Right. Yeah, we have in our phone book here. I don't know if anybody even looks at a phone book, but you know we have tire companies that begin with A. We have service companies that begin with A1, AAA, as you mentioned. Yeah, and has nothing to do with other than positioning in the phone book. You're absolutely right. So I was just wondering about companies, egos, names, and I've never wanted to name our broadcast after a person. I just wanted to name it after what I thought we were trying to do. Rick, you have there's something very interesting you sent me about an electromagnetic weapons timeline. Can I go through some of that?
Everybody gets off on that because John Lilly and the Lilly wave is coming out of your outlet plug-in in the wall right now. You are surrounded with weapons, and the 5G is an endgame weapon. I think what will ultimately happen is that people will realize it has the symmetry and the potential of it is such that they will. But right now, I'm looking at some new ones. Here's one. Here's a headline. This one, U.S. Marine Reserve units activated for emergency within the United States, which will come with little warning, cites threats in the homeland. Second media. Manpower guidance to activation and deactivation of a reserve component Marines ordered to active duty is ISO defense support of civil authorities. Here's another one. Manpower oh man, this one is signed on 10/3 by, let's say, the Marines, the SecNav, MRA, Joint Travel Regulations, DODI. We're about to go into overdrive right now.
This has been in the plans for a very long time, Rick, according to what I'm reading.
Are. Right now, right here, right now.
What I'm reading that you sent me, 1934, a method for remote control of electrical stimulation of the nervous system.
I was in those laboratories doing those studies. What do you think I'm thinking now as a farmer, wanting to be a Quaker up on top of a mountain, living a quiet, simple life?
Look, that's precisely why we moved to the middle of nowhere, and we're going to have to move again. But the thought that I would like to share with our class is think about where you live and think about how you get out of Dodge if things go bad. Can you get out of Dodge? I submit to you that you probably can't. I submit to you that you're surrounded by neighbors who don't get it. I submit to you, if you're listening to this broadcast, you have very few friends. Very few. If any. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying that I talk to a lot of people, and hardly anybody gets it. And the thing that bothers me the most, that I'm hearing the most often lately, is, well, the blue hair, the green hair, yeah, times are changing, and we're just going to have to change with it. And the answer is I refuse to change with it. I refuse to respond to people who cannot communicate. I refuse to. And when I talk to people my age, they all say the same thing, that the younger generation is absolutely clueless. They don't understand what's happening, and they can't comprehend how fragile the system is, the supply chain, how you can't just order something on the internet and have it all automatically show up if somebody didn't build it in the first place. And our young people aren't realizing that it actually takes engineering, it takes raw materials, it takes hard work to make the things that we've made. And it wasn't instantaneous. What we have built, what humans have built, has been evolutionary. We started out with a very simple widget, and then we made a little bit better widget. And then another guy makes an improvement on that, and another improvement. And when I was working for a company that manufactured electronics, it was a large Fortune 100 company. There was a budget. I mean, I was in the finance department, and I knew what was happening based on finance. The budgets of all the companies had a line item for buying competitors' products. So if you worked for Company A and you had a competitor, Company B, Company A would have X amount of dollars to pick the products from competitor, Company B, and bring him in and look at him and see if Company B had any better ideas that Company A, your company, needed to put in the product. That's what we did. You think that Ford doesn't buy Chevrolets, every single make and every model? Do you think that's the case? Do you think the Chinese don't buy American cars and take a look at them and see if they can improve them? Do you think Mr. Honda didn't come to the United States with a suitcase and buy every kind of carburetor he could buy to figure out who made the best carburetors and then improve on that? That's what happened. That's what made Honda great. They looked at all the competitors, they bought all the products, and they brought them back to Japan to make them better. I saw it happen. Our company, the Asians bought our company's products. Rick, did I understand you to say some broadcasters have an agenda and they attempted to manipulate you? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know who it is. I don't know why they're doing it, but yes.
Okay. Have I ever tried to do that?
No.
Okay.
Never. That's one of the reasons you have remained my friend, and I have remained loyal in trying to help you with your agendas.
Mm-hmm. Well, my agenda is really simple.
Yeah, it is. They're very simple.
We're volunteers, and we know we're going down. We know we're going down, and the plan is that some of us are going to come out a little better on the other side than if we know what's happening and if we prepare. And I'd like to see some people come out on the other side okay. That's what I'd like to, and better. And those are the people who are going to be rebuilding. And I'd like to see that happen. That's the agenda in a nutshell. I've never said it that way before, but that's really it. Not everybody is going to make it. Those who plan will probably do better than those who don't. There will be some good luck, if you want to call it good luck. Some people are just going to be in the right place at the right time and survive just because of circumstance. But I think that we are way better off preparing. And I look at what's happening in California, just shutting off the electricity. I mean, who was in that room where they said, well, I don't know, what do you think? Cut the power, that's what we'll do. We'll just shut it off. Who was in that room? Who made those decisions? And I'll bet it was a committee. And you can blame the committee rather than go grab that individual and say, you killed my grandmother. You killed my mother. You killed my father. You killed my child who was on, who needed electricity for medical treatment. And you shut off the power and you killed him. I mean, that's coming. I mean, those stories are going to come out. And, you know, and I was listening to commercials and the commercials are, and this is not just on any particular network, but if you listen, you're too fat. Is the IRS beating you up? Are you unhealthy? Can't sleep? I mean, that's a lot of what's happening in commercials all over. And it's true. It's true. So back to your document, World War II, 1945, just after World War II, the Allies, that would be the United States, Russia, had discovered that the Japanese had been developing a death ray, utilizing very short radio waves focused into a high-power beam. They tested this technology on animals, 1945. And then in 1953, your document says, John Lilly, when asked by the director of the National Institute of Mental Health to brief the Central Intelligence Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, National Security Agency, and various military services on his work using electrodes to stimulate directly the pleasure and pain centers of the brain. They wanted to know.
And guess what that's called today? It's called the Lilly wave.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, I was there. I'm watching it happen, and I'm trying to let everybody know what I know and where I'm coming from, because you do not want to participate in any of this. It is television. I remember when the CIA said, mind control, no, we don't need mind control. We have TV. Hey, kids, what time is it?
It's howdy doody time.
There it is. Read it and weep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And in 1965, a death ray weapon, let me say it a different way. A death ray weapon was developed by McFarlane Corporation, described as a modulated electron gun X-ray nuclear booster. Could be adapted to communications, remote control and guidance system, and electromagnetic radiation telemetry and death ray. 1965. So, Rick, these 5G towers are going up. I can envision people
you notice
with...
that all your new automobiles, when they drive near one of those, their guidance system, their GPS, goes out of alignment and has to be recalibrated.
Yeah,
That's
and eventually...
just the beginning.
And eventually I can see what'll happen to prevent people from plinking at these 5G towers when they've had enough. And by the way, class, I cannot recommend that on the air. So don't think that I'm recommending that you shoot at these things. I'm recommending that you don't. Well, I can see what's going to happen, that these 5G systems will be required for the automobiles to work. I can see how they tie that in so people don't blink at the towers. So they say, well, I can't do that, even though I don't like these 5G towers, because my car won't work and I really need my car. And even more important than that, I need my cell phone. I can see it. I can see it happening. We're dumber than a box of rocks. The GDP, through their ignorance, is taking us down right here, right now, and we're watching it happen. And there's no reasoning with them. They are the GDP. Any quick comments, Rick?
No, that just about wraps it for this day.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing you next week, same time, same station. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, Richard A-L-A-N Miller.com. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.